I'm Joyce Hornady. You might say accuracy is my business. I make bullets.
You are listening to the Hornady Podcast.
Thanks for joining us and enjoy the show.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Hornady Podcast. I'm your host, Seth, and some special guests today. An honor and a privilege for Steve and Jason Hornady on the Hornady Podcast. Guys, thanks for coming on the show.
And we're with our world-famous Seth Swirsik, who is the guy in charge of this thing and has more followers than you, me, and the company put together.
And personally, I'm happy about that because I don't want to be followed on any blank social media platforms of any kind whatsoever.
And I have to be honest, it feels a little, not disjointed, but a little awkward, I suppose, to introduce you to your own podcast. That's kind of weird. A lot of Hornadys in there.
It really is your podcast.
Yeah. Well,
we're just participants.
It takes a village, and it takes the permission from guys like you, and it takes Preston and Judd behind the camera and a lot of production staff and stuff. So it does take a team, and I appreciate you guys letting us do this. And our listener really appreciates it as well because, Jason, as you facetiously alluded to, there is some, we get recognized places because people like the podcast. They don't like Seth. They like the Hornady Podcast, and they like Jaden Quinlan. They like Miles Neville. They like the stories that Neil gives, and that's cool to have this outlet to give them. And I really want to take advantage of this right now with you guys here. It's 75 years, which we've put out. Anybody that follows Hornady or follows the Hornady Podcast, they know we're celebrating 75 years. And a cool tangent to that, so is Ruger and so is Swarovski, which I think is pretty neat. 1949 must have been a hell of a year, I suppose, for the outdoor space.
Everybody was putting their lives back together after the war.
Yeah, sure. A lot of opportunity, a lot of holes in the market, a lot of niches that need filled, and a good opportunity for a businessman. And so to kind of get this conversation started, I was trying to dream up some stuff that we hadn't talked about. Episode 1 with you, Steve, we talked a lot of historical stuff. And one thing that I don't remember necessarily addressing was 1949. Your dad started this company. And like you said, people are rebuilding. There's some niches that are available in the market. This couldn't have been Joyce Hornady's first business venture. I'm guessing he had some successes and maybe some failures leading up to it before he started what would become Hornady Manufacturing. Yeah,
he had a sporting goods store here in town, a general sporting goods, jocks and socks, all the stuff that you do for team sports and so on and so forth. But that really, and it was a gun store too. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't his passion particularly. It was a way to have a business, and I think Dad was probably entrepreneurial from the get-go and knew he wanted to do something, and whether he was going to make bullets or not, he was going to end up doing something.
So he was an entrepreneur at heart from the beginning.
I would say, yeah.
Okay. Well, that's a neat drive, and I see that in you guys, and I've seen it in other people before where they're just wired differently. They approach problem sets differently than most people, and that's a unique personality trait to have. Do you know, before the war, did he have any other entrepreneurial type dives?
Okay, I wasn't born.
No, I'm just curious if you know of any.
And there wasn't actually, no, because in the 30s leading up to the war, Dad was a salesman for a number of different companies and things. I know my mother talked about Nebraska Sales Book Company, which is funny because this is a product that doesn't even exist, because you went out and people got, you kept records on paper of your sales in stores. They didn't have cash registers. You didn't have anything.
Right.
Well, they had a cash register, but it didn't ring up what the items were and so on and so forth. So you had that sales book, and you wrote stuff down in it. It sold 6 gadgets, and for how much and so on and so forth. And that's what they had to do to track it. But I don't think that my dad was, as far as sales was concerned, was not one of his strong suits. He was supremely confident and comfortable with himself, so he could go talk to basically anybody about anything, and did. But getting busy on focusing on developing a sales program and marketing and everything like that wasn't
his thing.
No, he really liked that mechanical stuff from the get-go.
Well, luckily, it's Jason's thing because you're pretty good at that stuff.
Yeah.
So, entrepreneurial from the start, liked that type of stuff. Do you know, or would you speculate, maybe what his favorite thing about being a business owner? And do you think it's that mechanical stuff, the engineering stuff, like whether it was bullets or something else? He enjoyed that part the most.
He liked making stuff, and fixing stuff. And the part that he didn't like the most, I think, was dealing with people. You say dealing with people, the HR side of these things, about when you had people that you needed to do these things for, and you may not have an opinion, but how do you go about telling them that you don't want to do that, and telling them that you wanted them to do something that they maybe didn't want to do, but that was the direction you wanted them to take, and that wasn't something that he liked to do very much. So,
got it. Well, that probably leads into something that gets talked about a lot less than Joyce Hornady, and that's Marvel Hornady and her involvement in the business. Was she involved early on in those years? Because I know certainly after 1981 she was heavily involved, and I'm guessing at varying degrees leading up to that.
Yeah, Mom kept the books for the company early on in the years, and in the 40s she would have been keeping the books for the sporting goods store and all those things, and as he was going forward with that stuff. And she did that a little bit up in the very early 50s, but then I got born, and that's when Dad hired somebody in-house to start taking care of that stuff.
Right.
And Mom was always a strength behind the throne, an anchor and a solid answerer for my dad or input. She wouldn't complain to him or anything like that, but I think she would be supportive of what he was doing and or tell him if she thought he needed to do something differently. But they had a pretty good partnership in that regard. So
that's
very comfortable with that relationship.
Good to hear.
Was there ever a point where you recognized, or when do you think they recognized, hey, this business is going to be okay? I mean, in the 50s, they hadn't been around that long. I mean, there's lots of businesses that make it 10 years. There's lots of businesses that make it 12 years and they're gone. I mean, there's lots of family businesses that don't make it this far. Was there a point where you recognized it, or they did, where, I mean, it was 1957. It was when?
Well, looking back, I can tell you when Mom figured it out. At the time, it didn't dawn on me or register with me because the business was that was what my dad did. He left in the mornings. Everybody's dad left in the mornings and went to work. And my dad left in the morning and went to work, and you went down to the factory and so on and so forth. But in about 1958, I'm going to estimate, my mother wanted to buy a Lincoln Continental. I think she discovered that, or she felt they had arrived, and they couldn't get the car in the garage. So they ended
what a
up
special moment.
Yeah. But I remember this. I don't remember the Lincoln, but I remember that Mom brought that car home and couldn't close the garage door. And so we ended up buying an Oldsmobile at the top of the line at that point in time, and it had air conditioning, which was really good. But you want to know when my mother figured it out? It was sometime in the 50s. She figured that this was going to be the deal because she built that house that I live in today in 1960.
And it's a deep garage.
And, well, it housed a Lincoln. I don't think she built the house just for a Lincoln, but she had one pretty damn close after we moved in. Yeah, I remember that Lincoln. 1964 yellow, suicide doors, beautiful car.
It sounds like it.
Black leather interior. I could say some other things about that car, but I won't.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. Well, I have a question about those years between 49 and 58 so the headquarters, as I know it, in Grand Island, Nebraska, that's what I recognize as the headquarters. Well, it started, as we all know, on 4th Street in a garage. Well, and the garage is still there. I forget the business that's in there right now, but you can drive by it. Do you have any recollection? Did you go there? Do you remember that place? Any
Absolutely.
employees, or it was office space? Did you hang out there? What was that first little garage like?
Dark and narrow.
Hmm.
That's what I do remember. But he ended up having to he'd rented another building also because you couldn't get everything done in that one. And the guy that did shipping for us forever.
Bob?
No, and I can't remember his name right now. Ultimately come to me, but always walked around, had a cigarette in his mouth, and it had burned right almost down to his lip before he'd get
Unfiltered.
yeah. And he was washing bullets in a different building, and that's where they did that secondary processing, and they had a 55-gallon drum. I think it was a 55-gallon drum. That's what my ancient memory remembers. It was a 55-gallon drum, but that might just have substituted something for it. And it had an outboard motor attached to it, and that was the power that agitated the liquid inside. So they put the bullets in there, turned the the outboard motor on,
Two-stroke?
fired up. Okay, you're pushing it, but anyway.
Yes, it was a two-stroke.
Yeah.
What else would it have been for an
Yeah.
outboard at the time?
Yeah, I suppose.
But there's something that I have never heard before.
That right there, I can imagine you hear, the two-stroke, you smell the oil burning. Oh, that's just Joyce and the crew. They're washing bullets.
But that's what it was. That was what you did, because they didn't have pumps and filters and storage tanks and all of those things. And I have no clue what the liquid was that we did it in. It wouldn't be the same type of soap and water that we eventually went to.
Yeah.
You sure it's not Blue Dawn? Seems like Blue Dawn fixes everything else.
it
In the
really
I don't think
does.
Blue Dawn had been invented at that time, but
That's a unique, if you've never heard that, thanks for sharing that. And in that garage, was there a dedicated office space, or was this just you open the door?
nope. There was a kind of a front entrance, a
Okay.
front office, and Dad had an office right off the side of it. I think you've seen pictures of a glass front there, and his office was just to the right of that. I don't remember. Must have been the secretary's desk would have been sitting there in front if somebody came and knocked on the door. But you didn't have that many people coming in. The people who came in the front door most of the time was the postman.
Okay.
Bringing in the mail and stuff like that, and or locals that were supplying services or whatever.
Well, and anybody who's been to Hornady Manufacturing in the last long, long time I'm guessing it wasn't the same awe-inspiring, look at all this taxidermy kind of stuff.
We didn't have any taxidermy then. The very first one we got, and we still have it, is a white-tailed deer that's in the main office there. And Marge McGovern, who was the secretary for my dad at the time, that deer mount is in a semi-sneak facing forward, looking down type of a position. And when they moved out to where we are now, that deer was mounted on the wall, and it was looking straight at Marge, and she hated it. But considering her personality, she deserved it.
Oh my gosh.
And if any of her family is still living, they know exactly what I'm talking about.
Okay. Do you remember when you guys were when your mom was looking for the Lincoln and quote unquote made it, you would have been breaking ground on the new facility. Do you remember about the amount of employees that were down on 4th Street?
Seth, please, come on.
I
I
was
was
just-
like 5.
I'm not a mathematician, but maybe.
6,
Yeah.
maybe 7.
Okay.
That was not something that was in my brain particularly. But I remember when we built the plant.
Yeah. So what was that like? I mean, that had to be, one, to be small and to see this huge building. It was 8,000 square foot.
That's not very big.
That's not very big now, but was that pretty impactful to you at 8, 9 years old?
Not that I recall.
Hmm.
That first building was really very small. And in 1960, he built the addition and put the tunnel in, and would have lengthened the building at the same time. So by then I was 11.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe some of those things registered with me, but not that much. I
Yeah.
don't remember being particularly impressed with the space, but I do remember this construction. And I'd come out to the factory with a friend or whatever, and we'd play in the plant which thinking about it today, my HR people, if I had an 11-year-old kid crawling around the plant doing stuff like that, they would just be apoplectic about how you can't do that. You can't.
Pre-OSHA.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that hadn't even been considered, but yeah, I came out and played. I remember that. And Chuck Schreiber took I'd claimed an office when they built it, this will be my office. And then Chuck Schreiber moved and took my office away from me. I wasn't very happy about it at that point, but
I'm not sure you ever forgave him.
Yeah.
Probably didn't. And if any of his family is still alive, they know exactly what I'm talking about too.
Well, you got the big office now.
Yeah, whatever.
Right. So from that new kind of build, 1958, and you obviously went out, you did some other things, you come back to the company.
Bore Driver ELDX. Fast and easy to load. The polymer base seals the bore and engages the rifling while the post and pedals grip the bullet's boat tail. With its superior ballistic coefficients and reduced drag, the Bore Driver ELDX drives its 340-grain bullet to target with the energy and accuracy that turns shots into success. When you have one shot this muzzleloader season, make it count and use the best. Bore Driver ELDX from Hornady.
Kind of the same questions now, or that same stuff for you, Jason, as growing up as a youngster. So, Steve, you remember your dad went to work in the morning, came home at night. There wasn't a whole lot of fanfare about that. Do you remember kind of similar feelings growing up?
Oh, yeah. So when I was growing up, a lot of times it'd be on Saturdays, but there'd be times when my mom would bring us by. And so not only did my father work there, my grandfather Hornady worked here. My great-grandfather, my grandmother's father worked here, and my mother's father worked here. So
talk about a family operation.
I would also go, not at first, but I remember prior to both my grandfathers passing away, I'd come out here and I'd run out and see them, which pretty sure OSHA still would not think that was so great for me to run out in the plant. But that's what you did. And the plant, to me, when you walk in the bullet plant, it still smells the same as it did when I was 5, 6 years old. You smell the oils and you smell the stuff, and it's just something that you walk in. It's like, yep, this is the bullet plant.
Yeah, I know. In my personal life, I'm sure everybody does. There are instances where I'll smell something or I'll hear a sound, and you can close my eyes for a split second, and you can almost trick yourself that when you open your eyes, you're going to be right back there. And those can be good or bad, but in this case, I'm guessing that's a good feeling.
Yeah.
That you experience that too, Steve?
Yeah.
Yeah, that smell the cutting oil or something like that.
Yeah, it's the oil on the machines. It's pervasive, and yeah, I smell it. Mm-hmm.
That is, kind of a shared experience, I think, for everybody. Not necessarily bullet plants, but having been to other manufacturing facilities in this industry, sometimes I know what's coming around the corner because we have one of those, and or I know there's a tool room because I can smell the lathe.
Yeah, or you walk into a mechanic's garage and it's got that motor oil smell, or wherever you go. But I just remember walking out there, and I can remember holding on to 2 fingers from any one of these people that walking through the plant.
Yeah. Do you think they kept closer tabs on you running around the plant than they did your dad?
I don't know. I also remember my sisters and I, when we would come out here and Dad would be working, they had it was a 4 or 6 button phone system, the old lit up buttons, and you'd push one, and we'd take turns calling each other in all the different offices and running. Yeah. So I don't know that they kept that close of tabs on us, but there were plenty of, nothing bad was going to happen.
No. And it was pre-camera phone. So even if it did.
Yeah. There was plenty of times when we were supposed to be mowing the lawn, and my best friend Doug Richling and I were playing in the attics where all kinds of stuff was stored, where we were supposed to not be. But yeah, we were not the most reliable lawn service on the planet.
Yeah. Well, you got people for that now. So we've talked about this in great detail on many other podcasts. We all know what happened in 1981, and probably a good time to bring up Marvel again, because just hearing the history, I feel like she was pretty important during that transition from obviously the tragedy of Joyce and the two other gentlemen passing into now you're got to step up kind of deal. And she came back into the office where she worked here.
She'd already come back.
Okay.
After we'd moved Pacific Tool here in 1972, I think. Yeah. Mom had come back to work somewhere in that time frame. She worked in the office doing books and stuff. That's what she used to do, liked doing it, and was going to be bored sitting at home. There's only so many sewing circles, book clubs, and so on and so forth that you can go to. And she was more active both physically and intellectually than being able to sit home and watch soaps and stuff like that. So, not that she wasn't involved with those. She was heavily involved with the museum then, the YWCA, and some of the other social service organizations, Red Cross, etc. She's always been involved with those. And we've always had a history of supporting community organizations like that. So she was already involved in that stuff. But she had that bookkeeping skill set. She knew how to do that stuff. And those were the things that needed to be done.
Yeah.
And like I say, she was bored sitting at home, so she was busy. But she'd been there for, I'm going to tell you, 4 or 5 years.
Oh, so already an integral part. And so one thing when I started at Hornady in 2013, when I started, it was expected that you donate money, that you donate time, that you work with charity. Do you think that was just the culture? I just stepped into that because that was already the culture. It sounds like maybe she kind of helped cultivate that culture.
She would have, but Dad had always believed in doing that. Because it used to be when the United Way, then it was the community chest drive came out. Dad took the cards around to each employee and handed it to them and waited for them to fill it out and put how much they were going to give, and then he'd go on to the next one. We always had 100% contributions.
How about that?
It wasn't an option to stand there and give it to you, you know. And if you didn't want to do it, there'd be a discussion. You know, you weren't going to get fired for it. It was just like, why wouldn't you want to be willing to help or whatever? And even after he was killed, we still did that into the early 80s. But by then we'd gotten enough employees that you started handing out the cards and you tried to encourage. We had a few obstinate individuals. I won't say their names because a couple of them are still alive that would refuse to participate. And I'd try to get them to join, but they wouldn't. So, but you know, now you've just grown beyond that. It's impossible. You present it, you ask for it, you hope for it, you explain why it's a good program, and truthfully, so many of our employees benefit from it, from the YMCA, the YWCA, the Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, Big Brothers, Big Sisters. All of those things are those same social services that are being provided to a lot of our employees to take advantage of. So it is an opportunity to give back also in that regard.
That's awesome. Well, whether or not Marvel helped cultivate that culture, which it sounds like she did, she sounded like a really driven woman, which is always inspiring to be around. And on a personal note, I've had just some awesome grandmas in my life. How was your relationship, Jason, with Marvel? Was she pretty awesome grandma?
I was her favorite.
Oh,
and the other grandkids that are around are alive, and all of them will actually think that they were the favorites. But
I think they acknowledged that you were.
But I spent a lot of time with her, and we had a lot of fun. And she set expectations.
Sure.
And so did they. But boy, if you didn't meet expectations, you also were going to have to tell your grandmother. And that was one of those threats that was like, geez, that's...
Make me feel bad.
Yeah. So, but...
like he ever had that happen.
So, we had a lot of fun, but she was a great grandmother to all of us and the community. When you went to see her, there was usually somebody in her living room getting counseled about one thing or another or whatever, but she always had a line that, you know, if you have enough to share, you should share, and that was ingrained in all of us. And and you do what you can. And it was. I have lots of fond memories with her.
That's awesome, and yeah, thanks for sharing that. And it's got to be cool for you guys to see, not the groundwork obviously that Joyce laid, that Marvel laid, and then you get to see how your dad continued on through that, and then now you're at a point 75 years later that you're looking at a landscape that is totally different than certainly what Joyce would have had in mind. And even in the last 10 or 15 years, the way that the landscape of our market share has changed, the products that we offer, the amount of bullets that we make in a year, the amount of ammo, the amount of machines, the amount of employees. When you look back on that, what are some of the hallmarks that you think has taken this company? Jason, you mentioned there's a lot of companies that make it a decade or 12 years or whatever, or there's a lot of family-owned companies that make it to the second generation. And then you throw in that third generation, you start throwing in others, and they just fail. What are some of the pillars that you think has gotten Hornady Manufacturing to a crescendo to where we are 75 years later?
Jeez.
Crescendo. That's
Yeah,
an
I mean, it's-
interesting.
and that was a big, long question.
Yeah.
Listening to him talk, he talks about how my grandfather just liked to make stuff. Well, then when Dad took over, it went from just making the stuff that we made, but also the new products and the new product launches. And I remember the interlock introduction, walking into the Dubes sporting goods store with you, and there being a poster about the interlock bullet. And then there was XTPs, and then there was VMAXs. And I think that when VMAXs came out, there was some really good timing when that all happened, and it went really well. And that was where I kind of watched. I was in college at the time, but where I guess I was working, but kind of watched the new product cycles start. And for a long time, we made a lot of new products, and then we didn't necessarily tell the world about it. We kind of make it and they'll buy it, and they made lots of them and lots of good new ones. And it was about the time the 17 HMR thing came around, and that one you didn't have to scream too much about it, and it got a lot of attention. And then Lever Evolution, and then that is when we really started to tell the world about stuff, and they started to get it. And that was kind of in my mind, the tipping point where we were able to start some pretty substantial growth. I mean, flex tips have turned into so many different things in our line that downstream effect of those things have just been pretty fun to watch and be a part of. And, and we didn't really change much of our sales strategy. We've changed our marketing. And if people realize that what we spend on marketing isn't near what they think, they'd all shake their heads, because I think everybody thinks we spend 20% on marketing, and that's never going to happen. But I would tell you that's kind of
the product innovation you think is really driven. And I would agree. I don't think there's any other company in our space that innovates on a consistent basis at the rate that we do.
And he and I don't have any pride of authorship in the new products. It's amazing what you can have happen if you don't care who gets the credit. And the new products that we've introduced in the last 10 to 15 years didn't necessarily come out of either of our offices.
No, they were mostly my inventions.
Well done, Steve.
Oh boy.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
everything that he said is correct, but the big shift that really happened was when we decided to make brass cartridge cases.
okay.
Yeah.
Because without that, we wouldn't be. We'd still be a bullet company, like some of our competitors in this business that make bullets for themselves and for reloaders and for OEMs, but we wouldn't be the company that we are today, being able to make brass. And that was, Dad was convinced you couldn't do that, because the era that he grew up in was, if you didn't know how to do it yourselves, it couldn't be done. You had to have the skills in house in order to be able to do that, and we didn't. So it was an impossibility. But when I was looking at it, we had no choice. We have to do this, because we were our competitor vendors basically had us by the throat and could either squeeze or release, and there was nothing we could do about it.
Yeah.
We had to change, or we wouldn't have 75 years, or we certainly wouldn't have. You wouldn't be doing any podcast. I guarantee you that, because we wouldn't be there.
Yeah, I think the difference between premium bullets and now being able to offer premium ammo loaded with components that you manufacture in-house, now I'm guessing is a larger portion than just the bullets, or certainly comparable.
Yeah, and he's right. I missed that. It was that was all happening before I started. But when I started, we did not make 223 brass because there was no reason to make 223 brass because it was so prolific and so inexpensive. And then 2006, 7, 8, when there was a run up, we couldn't get any 223 brass, and I think that might be one of the fastest brass projects you guys ever did, because we went from not making and not having any to making it. Seemed like 2 months. I'm sure it was more than that at the time,
Sure.
but it was fast.
Yeah, I feel like that's one of the things that's aided our innovation and our growth in my time here is how fast we can adapt to a changing market, how fast we can get a new product to market, whether that's something that we sell or something that we use internally. The speed in which we can do things. Now, I have friends in the industry that work in similar roles, and the timelines that they have for projects is like otherworldly compared to what I've come from here. And I feel like that's been another huge thing that has aided the growth, is not just the innovation, it's the speed in which you can innovate.
I'd love to say there's not a whole lot of sitting around going on around our building, but boy, it sure sometimes seems like there's plenty of sitting around going on.
Depends on whose office you're in.
There are a couple of projects that have been sitting for so long.
Hornady Security Mobilus Safes. Discover the ultimate solution for safeguarding your valuable equipment with Hornady Security Mobilus Safes. Offering an innovative modular design, Mobilus safes can be easily transported and assembled piece by piece in any room. Featuring a full square lock interior organizing system that maximizes storage space with countless storage configurations. Elevate your security with Mobilus safes from Hornady Security.
You know, that reminds me of a story, because I went into before we moved engineering and everything out here, well, before we built this building even, but I'd walked into the engineering department. There was a drawing of some product. I don't remember what it was. And I walked into the engineers and I said, look at this. You guys this project has been here since whatever date was on there, and you still haven't got it done. And I was just giving them crap. And one of the young engineers looked at it and said, I wasn't even born yet. And I'm like, that's so funny. But I gave it to another young one, I think it was Riley.
I think it was.
And he looked at it and he said, my mother wasn't born yet. Oh my God, that's a knife right straight through the heart. My mother wasn't born when you started on that project. So, by the way, they still haven't finished it.
Yeah. Well, that project excluded, there's been a lot of projects that have come to fruition from conversation in an office, conversation at a rifle match, to finished product really, really quickly. And I have to commend you guys for across the board, but largely with the engineering staff and a ton of the production staff, you guys have hired some absolute pipe hitter employees that can get the job done and are passionate about what they do. They're not just good engineers or good at making things. They are specifically good at making bullets, cases, whatever it is.
Okay, so for all of you engineers that are listening to this podcast, Seth is not your friend, and he is not actually getting you a promotion or a raise.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, I'll take that as a segue.
But they are good. I give them
Yeah,
They are.
to jump into recently, we had Employee Appreciation Day, which is something that you guys do, which the employees appreciate. And I'd like to, we usually don't talk about this publicly. And so there's been some social media posts with some photos. We had all the employees gathered up. I just would like to get your perspective, not the employee perspective, but the leadership perspective of why you do that and what that means to be able to do those things for your employees.
This is all you.
Well, I mean, you go all the way back to my dad. You had a profit sharing plan. And that's what employee appreciation is, our profit sharing day. It's the announcement of what those contributions to the profit sharing plan will be. And we've been profitable, we've been successful, and back to what you said about my mother said that if you have it, you should share, or if you have enough, you should be able to share. And that was the whole concept behind profit sharing. And it's just grown into a bigger program, partially because of the number of staff that we have and what the numbers are. But we added to profit sharing because we got to the point where you're delimited by what the federal government allows you to contribute to an individual as a percentage of their wages or whatever, because your government doesn't want people to receive too much money, tax without having to pay taxes on it up front. So it's just grown from there, and we have an opportunity to talk a little bit about, where we are with the year and where we are with employees. And this year is our 75th, so I don't know, we were fired up and had a good time up there this time, more than I've actually had people come up and talk about how that was so much fun. We were just bantering back and forth, which is, kind of sort of what we do on those deals.
Yeah, a lot to talk about, and they started this way before, but half of it is a true bonus check, and the other half goes into your 401k. And their goal long ago, and I'm sure the numbers have changed, but if you work here long enough and put in a full career, your 401k should leave you as a millionaire. And that is something that's important to everybody in the building. I mean,
Right.
The more we can set everybody up for when they're done working, the better off that is. But yeah, it was fun, and we're having some parties and we're doing some things, so we got to brag on that. The 76th profit sharing day might not be quite as exciting as the 75th.
It'll still be almost full employment or full attendance day, though.
Yeah.
Most attended day of the year.
I can I can't imagine why.
Lowest absenteeism. Yep.
Yeah. Well, it's a cool day. Everybody's excited, but it's not everybody gets to see you guys or hear you guys talk that often. And that's one thing that I've enjoyed working. I didn't know this as a kid, like, a family-owned company. Okay, yeah, whatever. I need a job. But now working in one, and a good example is Austin Simmons in our technical staff. He was up near Bassett with some buddies pounding on prairie dogs this weekend, and they're living Bassett, Nebraska, very rural out in the Sandhills, awesome place. And they were asking him, like, "Oh, do you ever get to see Steve and Jason?" It's like, yeah. Like, I walk by Jason's office every time I have to use the restroom or fill my water bottle up. Like, they are active in the company, and you can interact with them. And there's some staff that say doesn't get to, they work nights, for example. They don't get to interact with you guys that often. So on this day, they get, to hear you address the company and give them kind of the state of the company and where it stands is a unique opportunity that other employees at other companies don't get. They don't get that personal interaction, which is meaningful. Like I said, when I was younger, didn't mean anything to me. But now that I work in that environment, and I have a bunch of friends, almost all of them, that don't work in an environment like that, I see the benefit to it. I think that's worthwhile.
Good on you.
Yeah, right.
Find the latest shirts, hats, hoodies, and accessories that you see here on the podcast and much more at HornadyGear.com.
So, it's 75th. We had Employee Appreciation Day. You guys appreciate your employees. That's great. But we also have, for lack of a better term, a big damn party coming up. So I'd like to hear
Saturday.
You guys talk about that.
I'm ready for Sunday morning.
So what's the purpose of this party, and what are we celebrating? Obviously 75th, but who's all coming?
Why are you looking at me? This was your idea.
I thought because I was looking. So we had a 75th anniversary celebration at the SHOT Show, which is your opportunity to interact with your customers, which is, that's a customer base, and some vendors at that point. But we also knew, if you're going to have your 75th celebration, there's just a tiny little microcosm of the industry that's actually going to get to be a part of that, and hardly any of our employees get to be a part of that. So coming back to Employee Appreciation Day, that's what this started, is we're going to have a 75th celebration here in town for all of our employees, vendors that we didn't actually invite very many to SHOT because we wanted to focus on our customers at that point. And then customers that couldn't make that or whatever that, love to have you come to this one. So, it was just, it's an opportunity to really put on a great big show. Jason's got contacts in the music industry.
I think that's a strong statement, but we hired a pretty big name to come play for us, and we've got food trucks. It's going to be kind of state fair-esque, and trust me how much we're crossing our fingers. There's no rain. There's no thunderstorms.
Right.
There's no tornadoes. No. June 3rd in Nebraska or in Grand Island is a little bit of a nervous day. Well, we're on the 22nd, but and he said, if we're going to do this, let's do it first class. And so we're going to do it first class, and we're going to have a lot of fun. And neither one of us, most likely, or if we are at the 100th, neither one of us is going to be part of the planning. I promise you. I'm not even going to be. If somebody wants to have a 76th party, I'm not going to be part of that planning either.
The gals, mostly the gals, but a couple of the guys that are involved in planning this, putting it together, have really done a stellar job, because there's a lot of moving parts of getting. I mean, this is Tuesday, and they're setting up for it for Saturday, because it's going to be at the big outdoor venue, and we're looking for several thousand people, and like you said, food trucks, and a huge fireworks drone show, and a big concert with a big name. You'll be richly rewarded with that name or with that brand. So, I mean, anyway.
Yeah. Well, it's cool to me that, one, you did the SHOT Show thing, and you got all your industry friends, and it makes me feel part of something bigger when you guys host something like this, something very first class, and that all the employees and their spouse can attend. And not that you're throwing this huge party just for them, but they all are expected to come and celebrate, because there's reason to celebrate. And it's cool that they're all intimately a part of that, and wherever they are in the production chain of what is Hornady Manufacturing. It's cool that you're doing this not specifically for, but largely for that the group of employees that are making the stuff and getting the products out the door right now. That's pretty admirable, and I'm looking forward to a good time. My wife's looking forward to a good time, and Sunday morning might be maybe more like Sunday afternoon by the time I get to
sleep in a little bit. Huh? They're not expected to come.
Well, sure,
but they're welcome to come. Everyone
invited.
Everyone's invited, and there's an open house at the New West facility for a lot of our people and their family members. They get to come see where mom or dad work.
Yeah. Well, like you said, your dad wakes up and goes to work and comes home. Well, it's kind of cool to see where that is.
Where is it? So how does that work? And so we're looking forward to the open house. I think that'll be well attended with quite a lot of people coming through.
Mm-hmm.
And every employee, every vendor, everybody's important, and frankly, one of the most important groups of our people are the janitorial staff, and they should be able to celebrate with the rest of us. And the other one that's really important is our box vendor, because if the place isn't clean and we don't have boxes, there's not going to be a whole lot of things that happen around here. So we should be celebrating with them too.
Absolutely. Well, I'm looking forward to celebrate. There's a lot of reasons to celebrate. Obviously, 75 years worth of stuff. It's kind of an obligation to ask, what do you guys foresee for the next 75 years, from product innovation to leadership? How do you see that going?
Well, somewhere in the next 75 years, I'm going to die.
Yeah, me too.
So, me too. I'm not planning on that many more after up to that point. So, but the downside about talking about what you think is going to come, Seth, is that you have to remember that it's not just our friends that listen to this; it's our competition.
Yeah.
And so I shut the hell up. None
Fair
of their
enough.
goddamn business what we're planning.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. That is a very polite way of saying that. So-
Because there's another way of saying it too.
Well, trust it to say, I'm confident if I could speculate, you're going to see continued innovation and you're going to see continued family ownership, which to me are hugely important.
We like what we do, and Dad often reminds me that our biggest challenges aren't going to be from the things that we are in control of here. It's going to be what things are out there that mess with our habits and our industry, but we don't plan on going anywhere.
Right on. Well, I'll leave it at that. Any opportunity now, you've got the audience captive here. Anything you want to address the podcast audience with?
And I will tell you, Seth, I mean, for what Jason started this with, I've had a lot of people talk about these podcasts and what a job you do and that how you've been able to draw out our engineers and our tech staff and everybody and what we're making, how we're making it, why we're making it, what it does, how it works, and fill in all those blanks on things and just general information that people don't generally get very much of.
Mm-hmm.
So good job.
Well, appreciate that. Thank you.
To
Very
keep this job for another week or so.
Another week or so. Well,
you can go to the party.
yeah, after the party, we'll see. All right. Well, I do appreciate that. And guys, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thanks.
Everyone out there, hopefully you took something away from this dive into the last 75 years with Jason and Steve Hornady. We hope you enjoyed it. We'll catch you on the next one.